Welcome to Global Tax Talks, Tax in 60 Seconds. I'm Will Morris, and here are some things to watch out for in the coming week. First, as of the time of this filming, there have been no public statements about progress on the side-by-side Pillar 2 agreement at the Inclusive Framework meetings in Paris last week. But we did get an update of sorts from Brussels on where things stand. Last Wednesday, Benjamin Angel from the European Commission told a committee of the European Parliament that the aim was to produce a safe harbour for the side-by-side agreement rather than declare GILTI an equivalent regime. That's because under the EU directive, equivalence requires country-by-country ETR calculations. On the other hand, a safe harbour doesn't require that, or indeed amending the directive, but still binds member states. Nevertheless, the side-by-side safe harbour will still have to be legislated by EU member states, and completing that by year-end seems highly unlikely. Evidencing a rather detailed understanding of the US system, Angel stated that the tax burdens under Pillar 2 and GILTI were similar. He gave a useful history lesson on how the US had led the way with its own minimum tax in 2017 and had never intended to adopt Pillar 2. He also pointed out that the US system relating to tax on foreign income, with not just GILTI but also the BEAT and CAMT rules, was in fact more complex than Pillar 2, and finally added to prevent a situation where US tax rates could drop dramatically, giving the US an advantage. There would have to be a review mechanism of some type to revisit the deal if necessary. Angel's testimony was followed by Kim Clausing's. The former Biden administration tax official accepted that the US system was no walk in the park, but nevertheless questioned whether the Pillar 2 and GILTI tax burdens were in fact generally equivalent, stating, in quotes, "The very fact the US is objecting so strenuously to the UTPR shows you that the US system is weaker than the country-by-country Pillar 2 system." Well, not exactly. She ignored the objections that flow from having to comply with two rather than one incredibly complex regimes, and more importantly, the objections to the disadvantageous treatment of US credits and incentives under the UTPR. Disadvantageous treatment the Biden Treasury failed to remedy. Meanwhile, in a sign the EU 27 are not monolithic on Pillar 2, last week an Estonia official came out swinging, accusing countries of falling for the sunk cost fallacy and arguing that so much effort had been put into Pillar 2 that it could not now be reversed. The official said that all the Pillar 2 hard work could not justify keeping in place a bad set of rules. She also said that Pillar 2 diminished Estonia's competitiveness by eroding the benefits of their corporate tax system, under which retained profits are not taxed until distributed. She also took aim at the other side of that coin, noting that the relaxation of state aid rules and now under consideration would allow more tax credits and incentives that only large countries can afford, which makes Estonia still less competitive. Finally, the OECD published its annual review of the 4 BEPS minimum standards, which include confidential country-by-country reporting to governments. There are now 120 countries that have legal frameworks for CBCR, and there are a remarkable 4,900 bilateral relationships in place for exchanging CBCR reports. That is quite some progress in 10 years. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm in Africa this week, and next week's 60 Seconds will focus on the continent, including Nigeria's tax reform and Kenya's significant economic presence changes currently being discussed. So please come back then so that you stay global tax ready.